Good evening, everyone. If you are unfamiliar with this disembodied voice, I am Anagarika Drew here at Empty Cloud, and well, so are you here at Empty Cloud as well, with Ayya Soma, our abbess. And tonight we will having a Dhamma talk on bad karma and female rebirth. But before that, some meditation. First, though, hello to Gita. Elaine, hello Elaine, and to Kristen and Linda. Good evening, Linda. Yen says, hello, Ayya, venerables. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to you too, Jens. Aiden, Kumu, Mary, Ayya Bimalanyani, Sadhu, Ayya. Pleasure to see you. Stacy, Alexandra, Cow's our friend, Brittany. Hello, Amaranta, and I think that's all so far. So why don't we hand it over to Ayya Soma here? Will guide us in meditation.
All right, thank you, Anagarika Drew, and thank you all for joining us this evening. So we can start by settling in a comfortable position. Making sure our back is upright. And we can rock our body from side to side if we need to. And when we're ready, we can close our eyes. Take a few deep breaths to settle in. Checking in to see if there are any points of tension in the body. And whatever we find, we can intentionally relax, loosen up. So not thinking about relaxing, but actually relaxing. And we can spend a few moments just dwelling comfortably with the body, inside the body. We can slowly lift our attention up to the breath. Perhaps anchoring our attention to the tip of the nose if it's helpful. Or keeping a more open, wide angle to the entire body of the breath. Observing every in-breath and out-breath. with curiosity and deep attention. Cultivating a knowing mind in every moment. If the breath is short, we know that the breath is short. If the breath is long, we know that the breath is long. If the breath is subtle or coarse, we're aware that the breath is subtle or coarse. Not trying to make the breath any different than what it's like. Not trying to control the breath, but just observing the breath, learning from the breath. Watching closely in every moment. If thoughts appear in the mind, we don't need to become involved with them. We can just let them take their course, let them appear and disappear on their own. Like clouds passing through the sky. Just like the sky, we don't want to become bothered with the clouds that pass by. We can hold our attention to the breath, bringing it back to every in-breath and out-breath. you can come out from meditation practice. And stretch your body if you need to.
Thank you, Ayya, for that wonderful guidance and meditation. Before we get started with the Dhamma talk here, we got a few more friends and voices appearing. Hello to, I think it's a Venerable Chudha. Soti, nice to see you. Rhiannon, hello. Hello to Angela and Jessica. Melinda, long time no see. For me, anyway. Jonathan and Michael and Denise, hello. Oh, and Jessica Calder as well. So hello to all of you and welcome to the Dhamma talk section of tonight. And I'll presently hand it directly to Ayya Soma.
All right, thank you very much, Anagarika Juro, and thank you all for joining us this evening for this important topic to discuss. But before we start, we can pay homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, the reason why we are here tonight. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namassami. So today I was reading the news and the BBC reported that over 700 people have been killed in Myanmar since the military coup that started in February. Several of these 700 people were children. And unfortunately, throughout different Buddhist groups, both in the West and in the East, a lot of this human tragedy that has been happening in Burma has been addressed as it is the bad kamma of the Burmese people. That's why they are experiencing all this distress. So some people have acknowledged, the pain and suffering that the Burmese people are undergoing, but a lot of people, unfortunately, have somewhat dismissed it as, or labeled it as group karma, so that all these people are currently experiencing the consequences of their past unwholesome choices. Connecting it also, of course, with the human tragedy that happened a few years ago and with the Rohingya community in Burma, and so drawing a lot of different conclusions. And whenever we hear such, statements, I find them personally as a very good opportunity to really investigate the teachings of the Buddha. Because we hear so many times these concepts, and we don't have to wait until there is a military coup in Burma. Since I started my Buddhist practice in Western circles, here in the United States, there's so many sort of suggestions, for example, on what bad kamma is. So I've heard numerous times that it's bad karma, for example, to be born as a person of color or to be born as a woman, because clearly, apparently, there's a lot of discrimination towards women and people of color, also people who are non-straight in their sexual preferences. So the entire LGBTQIA plus community is subject to a lot of discrimination. So it's labeled as, well, it's bad kamma of all these people. So apparently in the West, there's this kind of rumor that the only type of good kamma is being born as a white male. I was like, oh, very interesting. And in the East, Eastern circles, there's perhaps less of an emphasis on the latter and more an emphasis on the former. There's definitely lots of rumors on how it's bad kamma to be a woman. And it's not like something that happened in the last couple of decades like it has in Western circles of Buddhism, since Buddhism is somewhat, new, quote unquote, practice that is spreading throughout the West. Or it hasn't been practiced in the West, actually, that one might be more accurate historically, for many centuries. So it's relatively new that there are so many people who are practicing in recent history. But for actually, I would say several millennia now, there is this embedded rumor that it's bad karma to be a woman. When I put robes on, many people were actually very adamant to, come up to me and give me the good news. Like, hey, I don't know if you're aware, but yeah, it's really bad karma to be born a woman. You also have your period, so that makes you entirely crazy once a month, which means, the odds for you to attain awakening are significantly decreased. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Last time I checked, all the sort of angry crimes or rapes, etc., weren't exactly perpetuated by the female gender. So I was like, oh, a bizarre, kind of suggestion. But, it's so embedded to the point where in certain Buddhist countries or certain Buddhist traditions, for example, in the Tibetan tradition, it has been sometimes become synonym with being a woman, bad kamma. In the Tibetan tradition, there is a man, and then there is an inferior rebirth, which is the definition, fundamentally, the word used to refer to women. So whenever we encounter these, these ideas, whether we're born Buddhist, actually, I realize that it's also present in people who are born Buddhist, but definitely if we're convert Buddhists, we tend to, start having a bad relationship with kamma. So we're like, well, I don't know about this kamma. Sounds very much like victim blaming, or sounds very much not particularly useful or unwholesome. And what is it? What is the relation in my life? So we can, go all the way to even stating that the Buddha never actually spoke about kamma, or that he wasn't really talking about kamma, and that actually the rebirth is a sort of myth, and we perhaps draw parallels to other religions. But if we go back to the text, we actually see that there's a lot of information on kamma, that the Buddha talks about kamma and rebirth pretty much everywhere in all the different nikayas. But he talks about it actually, I would say, in a different way than how we hear these concepts offered to us most often than not in sort of mainstream Buddhist circles. So not from enlightened beings, but from people who are practicing just like us, who have a lot of greed, hatred, and delusion, and kind of share their ideas on coming rebirth. So it's always important to go back to the suttas, to the words of the Buddha, to what has been, been preserved for the past 2,500 years, with an open mind, without rejecting what has been presented to us, but without actually also, buying it in and taking it as, well, this has been, it's been going on for so long, then it must be true, so I won't investigate it and I'll take it as a truth. No, we shouldn't have that attitude. But we should take it as a working hypothesis, and also at the same time see what do the suttas say about the subject. And so this is an ongoing project for me. I find it extremely fascinating, this process of investigation, to really deeply understand the Dhamma, really understand this practice and see how it's relevant to remove suffering, because that's what we're aiming to do. And so the first thing that has been apparent to me is the fact that a lot of times the way that kamma is used is actually used both as action and also as consequence. So there are two words in Pali, kamma and vipaka, but we tend to use it as both kamma and vipaka, which creates the first confusion. So we say, oh, that person has bad kamma, or that person has good kamma, but in reality what we're trying to say is that person has what we perceive it being good vipaka. So the consequence of previous actions that perhaps we weren't even there seeing them. So we somewhat assume that that is what is going on there. So it's very important not to be confused by this use of kamma, but to actually understand that there is a difference between action and result. And actually, the definition of kamma is not only action, but is intentional action. So something that we are intentionally doing that then will have a consequence. So getting back, for example, to what is happening in Myanmar, when people say, for example, that the population, the Burmese people are experiencing bad kamma, what they're trying to say is really bad vipaka. But what do we know for sure is the invitation. So on one hand, when we look at the situation, what is very, very clear, what we know, is that the military is doing a lot of unwholesome acts in accordance, when you compare them to the Buddhist teachings. The Buddha says it's unwholesome to kill, and the military is killing. The Buddha says it's unwholesome, it's bad kamma, bad action to steal, and the military is stealing. It's bad action to lie, and the military is lying. It's bad action to commit sexual misconduct, They've been doing it way before the military coup for many, many years, decades, including with the Rohingya people. It's the military. It's bad action to use intoxicants and sell intoxicants. They own, if I remember correctly, all the alcohol production in the country is owned by the military and consumed by the military. Not entirely, obviously, they also sell it. But we see that is pretty obvious, that it's clear. It's clear bad kamma, clear action that is unwholesome. But in terms of vipaka, of the Burmese people, those killed and those who are in distress, we're actually all in the realms of speculations and assumptions. So we are assuming that these people are reaping the results of their kamma, their past kamma. But we can't really know for sure. We weren't there. We don't know. We don't see. What we know for sure is what I've said, the bad kamma. And I want to share actually on this particular subject of assumption a quote directly from the Buddha. So in Anguttara Nikaya 644, there is a lay disciple, Migasala, who is a lay follower making assumptions on future destinations of lay people based on their actions. And the Buddha is actually very adamant in saying that that is completely unproductive. She was making very bad assumptions. And he says, do not be judgmental regarding people. Do not pass judgment on people. Those who pass judgment on people harm themselves. I alone, or one like me, may pass judgment on people. So what fundamentally the Buddha is saying here is that he knows. When the Buddha says, draws connections between causes and consequences, he doesn't just assume. He doesn't look at people and go like, oh yeah, I'm sure they did that bad deed or that bad thing in the past, etc., etc. And now there is this consequence. He knows, he truly sees, he's done the work. So if we're not quite there yet, instead of improvising our judgment day, as Bhante Buddharakkhita says, in Buddhism, we should aspire to the non-judgment day. We can do it right here, right now. You know, we don't have to wait in the future. We should be doing it. We do not know. What we do know, though, is what is unskillful happening in front of us. And that not only we can say, but we should denounce as unskillful, as unwholesome. And we see also, getting back to, the Buddha, our teacher, how does he actually speak about kamma and vipaka? So, for example, when the Buddha encounters Angulimala, that we all are familiar with, who had done so many incredible unwholesome actions within his current life, had a garland of fingers of all the people that he had killed. And once he sees the Buddha, his first instinct is to kill the Buddha. So not the greatest conditions, hey? So what the Buddha tells him is not, well, it's the fault of your victims. Like, oh, the victims are doing, they did so many bad deeds in the past. So, they just got, what goes around comes around. So they deserved it. Or he also didn't, tell him, well, I've got so much bad kamma, I'd better wait for future lives or whatever, to be redeemed. But rather he tells him to stop, something that is very useful. Practical information. You see someone doing something unwholesome, the Buddha says, stop. please stop Angulimala. And it actually works. Angulimala stops. And someone who had made so many unwholesome actions all of a sudden starts cultivating the wholesome. And through wholesome actions, attains awakening. And in the process of attaining awakening, as he's purifying his mind, he encounters, it's so touching. We see also how awakened beings or people in the process of attaining awakening, how they start really understanding what is skillful, what is beneficial to say, how to act out of compassion. And as he's going out on alms rounds, he sees this woman who is experiencing a lot of pain while giving birth. She's having a difficult labor. So as he's seeing that, he doesn't go up to her and say, it's your bad karma. Look at all the bad deeds that you did in the past. Uh-oh, yeah, that sucks. Well, now, you deserve what? All this pain and suffering that you're in. Yeah. See you later. No, what he says is actually, he inspires her with words of Dhamma, with words of virtue, sharing all the virtue that he had developed in his life. And he says something that it's so beautiful. He says, sister, since I was born with the noble birth being an arhat, being someone who has entered this path, entered the stream. He says, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. How beautiful is that? Delightful, inspiring the mind. And that woman and the infant became well as a consequence of that powerful sharing, that powerful statement. He didn't go to her once again and say, look at all your bad kamma, because it's not useful, it's not beneficial. And we see the Buddha only brings actually the reflection, encourages the reflection of the fact that we're reaping unwholesome or unhappy, how do you want to call it? We reap unhelpful results from our past kamma when it's beneficial. So when then Angulimala, when he is a perfectly enlightened being, and he goes around on alms, and people who he has harmed in the past see him and start throwing all sorts of things at him, then the Buddha encourages him to reflect that it's the fruit of past kamma. He exhorts him to reflect on his vipaka out of compassion by saying, bear it, bear with it. Bear it, Brahmin. You are experiencing here and now the result of deeds because of which you might have been tortured in hell for many years, for many hundreds of years, for many thousands of years. Encouraging him once again to endure that, and also to consider how, thanks to this incredible path, actually, he has made an end to suffering. And so this is definitely a powerful teaching, that if we are on the receiving end of, I think that the Buddha shared this not necessarily solely to Angulimala, but to actually, for us, out of compassion, to really understand that if we're on the receiving end of unwholesome deeds, that is a personal reflection that we should do. So yeah, we can reflect that perhaps what we're enduring is the product of unwholesome past deeds. But that doesn't mean, he doesn't say, okay, well then you've done bad deeds in the past and now you're suffering, so just, accept it, be there in the corner passively, wait until the next life when you'll have better kamma. None of that. But rather, actually, it's something to encourage us. Once again, it should be beneficial to prompt us to make more skillful choices as we move forward. And ending and advocating for the end of unwholesome deeds for the benefit of ourselves and others. So that's where we get a lot of times in, the fake news, what I'm going to call fake news in Buddhism. So these distortions of Dhammas, or of interpretations of kammas being this predestination, this sort of fatalism that you are born in a particular way, and that's sort of your kind of trademark, and you should just be resigned to your fate. So perhaps if you're now experiencing a military coup in Myanmar, you're just supposed to be there and be killed and be tortured and just wait. No. I would say that it's actually very wholesome how the Myanmar people are actually active in peacefully protesting against the coup, denouncing the unwholesomeness of the actions of the military. That is good kamma. That is a good action. And it's very important when we think that there is a predestination, in terms that kamma is this sort of inevitable predestination, we're doing a disservice to the Dhamma. Because if actually kamma meant predestination, then there would be no way to practice the Dhamma. There would be no path to work. There would be no Angulimala. And would be completely pointless and useless. So always questioning, where do we get our ideas from? Where are our assumptions based from? And when we get into, the realms that we were talking about earlier, perhaps here in the West, where we're talking about where people sometimes, or actually not sometimes, unfortunately, way too often, make statements like, it's bad karma to be a woman or to be a person of color or LGBTQI+, or you name it. We should always look back to the text, to the Suttas. Does the Buddha actually talk about kamma in that way? Well, actually, in the Chula Kamma Vibhanga Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 135, the Buddha says that human beings, and he also clarifies, women and men, he says. But we can say also all sort of in between. He says, are born influential, or healthy or sick, or beautiful or ugly, or long or short-lived, or wise or unwise, etc., based on past karmic choices. So you never see actually genitals being put as a result of past karmic deeds, or in this sort of construct. Definitely not race at all. As a matter of fact, in the Vasetta Sutta, the Buddha is quite adamant in highlighting how all of these are constructs, and that there is no distinction between beings based on any of these arbitrary things, such as genitals, such as caste, such as you name it. And so these constructs last. We create them, and they last long enough in society that we start believing in them. Sometimes they are even like very recent, but they have lasted for perhaps our entire life. So we are actually so sure that that's how things are. But that's the product of delusion. Those are not the teachings of the Buddha. And it's very important to actually recollect how in the Suttas, it's only 2 people that I'm aware of that say things sort of along those lines. When it comes to gender, it's Mara. It's not the Buddha that says that women have difficulties attaining awakening, or that they should give up the path, or they're inferior. It's Mara. Yeah, Mara. I see you, Mara. And other people who think that they're superior or inferior based on birth are from the Brahmin caste. Unenlightened beings who develop this conceit of superiority. But it's never the Buddha nor his disciples. Actually, both the Buddha and his disciples, enlightened disciples, do the opposite. They dispel wrong view. We see that actually the color of the skin is not even addressed in the suttas, because it wasn't really a thing in ancient India. So I laugh because we start believing these things so much. Like we create it. In Italian, we say te la canti e te la suoni. Like you create the whole composition. You have a band. You create everything. You're like singer. You're the player. Create the script of the music. Everything. And we believe it and we think it's Dhamma. But it's actually Dhamma. Uppalavanna, one of the enlightened bhikkhunis, her name actually means blue lotus, correct, Bante?
Yeah, the color of blue lotus.
The color of blue lotus. And that's because her skin was so dark, so black, that it had a shade of blue. Was it bad kamma to be born Uppalavanna? I don't think so. If that's bad kamma, give me some of that. I would really like that. Yeah. Please, thank you. Thank you very much. The skin of the Buddha was golden brown. That's basically the only 2 times that I'm aware that a skin color is even mentioned. And it's just kind of like a statement, and just, matter of factly, kind of like, oh, at Savati, or we're in India. Oh, there's a black skin with the color blue and golden brown skin. So how all of a sudden these things become bad kamma? Or actually, once again, bad vipaka. Well, I would say that the bad kamma is creating these views, or listening to these views and believing these views, and sharing these views. There is nothing worse than actually spreading Dhamma. We should be encouraging others to practice the Dhamma, not Dhamma. So after being told so many times that it was bad kamma to be a woman, at a certain point I reflected and I was like, is it really, because I was starting to believe it. And I'm like, is it actually bad kamma? Well, actually, I think I'm full of good kamma. It's incredible, the good kamma that I have. or more the good kamma, because it's something that we do. It's the good kamma that I do, that I have done in this lifetime and I continue doing. It's good kamma to start a Buddhist organization. It's good kamma to spread the teachings of the Buddha. It's good kamma to want to generate bodhicitta, the aspiration for awakening. It's good kamma to aspire to want to become a monastic. It's good kamma to become a monastic. It's good kamma to create the conditions for others to go forth and become a monastic. It's good kamma to invite senior monastics, create the conditions for senior monastic to come here and share the teachings of the Buddha with myself and other beings. This is all good kamma. I have lots of good kamma. So that's what we should be reflecting upon. What are we doing? Not what are other people projecting on us. It's also good kamma, I would say, to dispel all these false myths, to dispel this Dhamma, to share the teachings of the Buddha, to have these conversations. And we should all be involved with them, in them, investigating. You know, a few days ago, during monk chat, someone said, I stopped believing in kamma, or like, I don't know about this kamma thing anymore because now there's COVID-19 and basically every single being in the world is experiencing bad kamma. It's like, she's like, they, I don't know, said, so does everybody have bad kamma? And I was like, yeah, So that's actually the nature of having a human rebirth. It's very important. The Buddha says as much in Anguttara Nikaya 4.134. Realistically, he says it all over the suttas. But in particular there, he explains how it's the consequence. The human rebirth is a mix of good and bad actions. Otherwise, if we had only made, if we had a prevalence of good kamma, we would have a really beautiful heavenly rebirth. And if it would have been all doom and gloom, we would be in hell. But we've done a bit of mix. We're here in the human realm, which is also incredibly fruitful to have this experience, because we can have a good understanding of suffering and nurture the aspiration to want to dispel suffering. But yeah, it's very important to understand that it's not just some people who we arbitrarily decide that they are having the bad kamma, and then there's the other people that are having good kamma, or whatever kind of crazy ideas that we create that are not in accordance with the suttas. But rather, I think a more skillful way to approach this is to understand that we all carry a bunch of seeds. Some are good, some are bad. And these seeds, need some moisture and need some soil. When all the conditions are in place, then they germinate and they have a certain result, right? And it's very important to understand that we all have done really bad, unwholesome things in the past. So we carry a lot of unwholesome seeds, and we also carry a lot of good seeds. And that's when we're experiencing, when all of these conditions come into place, then we experience good or bad vipaka. And even incredibly skilled practitioners, like the Tibetan lamas, for example, have experienced incredible bad vipaka. But they've made incredible good kamma. By cultivating the mind, by responding skillfully to what was happening in their life, and to spreading the Dhamma to so many different beings. Here in the West, it's thanks to so many also Tibetan Lamas, refugees that came here and shared the Dhamma, the good Dhamma. It's also important, when we think about the results of bad actions, that even the Buddha could be harmed by his nature of having a human body. Devadatta, in fact, harmed the Buddha. And the Buddha there, once again, didn't say, oh, well, it's my bad karma of like having a human body. It's not useful. What is useful instead is to highlight how harmful and horrible the action that Devadatta was doing, had done, and the horrible consequences that it would have. That is skillful. That is what we are all seeing in front of ourselves. It's also important to reflect that an arahat can be harmed and killed. But the point is, it's unskillful, extremely unskillful, extremely unwholesome to kill an arahat. Extremely bad kamma. That is bad kamma. It's killing an arahat. It's not bad karma to be an arahat who is killed by someone. It's ridiculous. So why does the Buddha not speak the way that we normally hear others speak about kamma and vipaka? It's a very important question. And the answer for me is that because he's an enlightened being. Because he teaches out of compassion, not out of punishment. He's not a God that says, oh, you bad people, look at all the horrible things that you've done. You've been doomed. You've got this original sin, that good luck for that, with that. Be ashamed of yourself, sinners. You're all going to go to hell. No, he speaks out of compassion, empowering us. Right here, right now. We cannot control the consequences, but we can control the causes. I will never be enough thankful to Venerable Dream-Aid, this Tibetan monastic, for sharing this precious teaching with me. Really made an impact in my mind. So yeah, that's why the Buddha shares the Dhamma in the way that he does. Let's make let's put in place the right conditions to have beneficial results. And let's learn how to endure whatever vipaka, whatever result that we're inevitably going to get from our past actions that we don't remember. We don't know what we've done in the past. We don't know what we've done in the past, and we definitely don't know what other people have done in the past. So we really should not get in there, but rather encourage others to practice the Dhamma. Because if we have, especially if we have favorable conditions to practice, or we're not right now being oppressed by anyone, if right now we have a situation of privilege, we should first reflect that it's impermanent. It's not going to last. Right now, it's a privileged situation, but soon that too will fade away. So what we should be doing in this moment is not settling, not just like, oh, well, oh, great, I'm having my round of like good vipaka, let me just sit here and do nothing. That's actually what the devas do. And then the Buddha says, once that karma is exhausted, boom, welcome hell. Because they haven't cultivated good, wholesome actions. So our focus should be not in cultivating a conceit of superiority, nor a conceit of inferiority if we're on the other end of the spectrum, but rather making good deeds. And most importantly, doing the best we can to allow people to practice the Dhamma, not to create obstacles for ordination, not to create obstacles for people to go on meditation retreats, not create obstacles for people to come and share space with us, but being the more and more welcome, actually inspiring ourselves once again from what Angulimala said. May even my enemies practice the Dhamma. This is how we should go. This is the attitude we should have. May even my enemies practice the Dhamma, because if they practice the Dhamma, they wouldn't hurt me no more. They wouldn't make unwholesome actions. So I think that's all that comes to mind on this subject. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to type them in the live chat, and Anagarika Drew hopefully will report them. Okay.
Sadhu. Thank you, Ayya, for sharing the liberating Dhamma. And we do have some questions here.
Mm-hmm.
So, starting with Jessica writes, I once read that women have a difficult time attaining enlightenment. Not sure where I read this. It's been said we show emotion more than men. Are such emotions defilements in Buddhist teachings? Can these emotions slow enlightenment?
Well, first of all, I would say that probably an Italian man, for example, shows emotions way more than an American man. Sorry, an American woman, not American man, an American woman. So a lot of these things, there are all these big generalizations that are not real. So gender is not real. It's a fabrication. It's just that we end up believing it. And when it comes to emotions, we are all experiencing emotions. So it's not necessarily that someone is more emotional than the other person. It's more how they are expressing those emotions. Is it more acceptable to externalize them? Or is it more acceptable to repress them? So repressing them perhaps might have a view that an external sort of acceptability. So we look someone, I was talking about it the other day, like my kind of subconscious construct of how or what an enlightened being should behave like. And I realized that it had nothing to do with actual enlightened beings, but I had created a sort of version of Queen Elizabeth in robes. Queen Elizabeth in the body of a Thai man in robes, was completely complete distortion of reality, an entire construct. So sometimes what we think is a reflection of a mind state, in reality is not. It's just a sort of, it's dependently arisen from our cultural conditioning or from what we're told outside. And once again, if we look at statistics, that's why I found it extremely absurd when I was told that due to PMSing, I had less opportunities to attain awakening. Have you ever seen an aggressive man, an angry man? Look at the statistics. Who commits the most rapes? Who commits the most wars? Who commits the most assaults? But I don't think that that has anything to do with it being an inherently male quality. It just has to do with patriarchy. That unfortunately is a system that has lasted for so long, since we have started recording history. So several thousands of years, that we think that is the natural world, that we think it's the norm, it's normal. But it isn't. So we all, once again, have greed, hatred, and delusion. It just manifests in different ways. And we all have to eradicate them. So here at Empty Cloud, I like to say that, us female-bodied people have PMS, and then the male-bodied people have IMS, which is not the famous retreat center, but it's irritable male syndrome. You can Google it, find lots of information there. So you see it sometimes here, we have lots of males right now in the room. Sometimes you see them, like, it's just irritable for no reason whatsoever. Yes, they just don't have a period right there that I'm aware of anyway. I don't know, I haven't really asked. So it's just the experience of being a human. But we like to categorize it. We like to say, oh, those people are better than those others, or those have better chances, or those have worse chances. But we are unenlightened beings. So if we're trying to pursue awakening, why don't we listen to the Buddha? I think that's a little bit smarter, because whatever we've done so far hasn't really brought us to awakening. So why do we keep on pursuing our delusions? We should dismantle our delusions, not create more delusions. So I hope that answers your question.
Right. Thank you, Ayya. And let me see here. Yeah, Jessica, about the questions with can women achieve enlightenment?
Yeah, the Buddha said, of course, women can achieve enlightenment. But not only did he say that absolutely women can attain awakening, he also said that he would have not died until he had female bhikkhunis, enlightened, ordained monastics, and enlightened lay female followers. So, sorry, not enlightened, but accomplished in the path, so with levels of awakening. So who had entered the stream, technically. So that's the noble sangha of bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, laymen, and laywomen. That's traditionally how it's, all of the sacred texts have that, not once, not twice, multiple times, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So the only being that I'm aware of that says something along the lines that you've shared is Mara. And he actually says it to Bhikkhuni Soma, from whom I get my name, while she's in meditation. He arrives and he says, oh, what are you doing there with your, women cannot attain awakening with their two-finger wisdom. So with that little wisdom, apparently it was a prejudice that was also going around at the time of the Buddha. And she turns around and she's like, who is this? Is this a human being or a non-human being? Who is like bothering me in meditation? And he's like, oh, she's like, oh, it's Mara, the evil one. And then she's like, what has womanhood? What does having a female body got anything to do at all when the mind is concentrated well and sees right into Dhamma? One who even thinks I'm a woman, I'm a man, or I'm anything at all is fit to actually have this conversation with Mara, in the sense of that Mara comes, addresses them, and puts wrong view in their minds. So whenever we think that that is what is defining us, a female body is defining us, it's an impediment, then it becomes an impediment, yes. But even if we think that having a male body is actually something that will make us make progress in the path. It's an impediment. Whether we have a conceit of superiority or a conceit of inferiority or even a conceit of equality, it's an impediment in the path because we're identifying with it. We can't attain stream entry. We believe so hard, so much that that's who we are, that there is no room for progress in the path. So throw it all out. Go, Mara, I see you. What has got to do? It has nothing to do with it. Do you think your mind is female, male, transgender? You don't have to answer. Actually, ponder it in meditation.
Right. And from Gita, we have some questions related to Mahapajapati. She says, the Buddha agreed to create a female monastic order only when Venerable Ananda asked for the third time. I was wondering why. Could it be because the female order was not yet set up?
So I would say the first question, instead of answering your question, I would like to present you with another question. Where, like in the Suttas, does the Buddha need the advice of an unenlightened being? You know, it was like the first time I read that thing, I was like, that's so odd. Ananda wasn't even enlightened at the time. And the Buddha asks, Ananda convinces the Buddha, like the Buddha does not know what to do. So he needs an unenlightened being, his attendant, to convince him after having said over and over again that he wouldn't have gone away, wouldn't have left this world, had he not ordained women. Oh, that's contradictory, isn't it? So there's tons of scholarly work that has been done actually on that particular sutta that proves it. There's lots of evidence because it's in contradiction with the entire actually Buddhist path. It makes no sense, for example, that the Buddha would give monastic rules before even creating an order. He would create exceptions to or particular rules where the Patimokkha, both for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, has been created as the monastics were committing infractions. So it's completely absurd that he would create rules ahead of time when there's no problem arising. So there's been there's actually lots of evidence that is a later creation of unenlightened beings who I think were, how do you say in English? We're trying to fit in with the Jonases. Yes, thank you so much, Bantis. Bantis always understands what I'm trying to say. He has a special connection with my brain. And yeah, you know, when you are Buddhism is the only religion that I'm aware of that does not discriminate against women. Actually goes even further, says that all of that misogyny is, you know, BS. Extremely inconvenient when the whole rest of the world is not only like stating the opposite, but actually not questioning the inferiority of women. Extremely inconvenient to have that stance. It's inconvenient today in the West. After all, you know, the work that so many women have done for women's rights, it's still a controversial, like, sort of statement. And you see still, you know, people who are trying to go like, well, actually, the Buddha didn't really mean that. Let me add my interpretation of how he couldn't have possibly like ordained both men and women. People question even the fact that the Buddha actually created a bhikkhuni order. It's mesmerizing to me. I actually find it incredibly fascinating how how deluded the mind can become and really believe the delusions to the point that it distorts the texts. And so the reason why we have so much information about bhikkhunis throughout the text is actually evidence of how much more there was in the past, because the fact that, we have all these commentaries, which is kind of the opposite of the other religions. The other religions create commentaries to try and justify sort of crazy ideas that were, not particularly, that made sense for the culture in the time, but were not particularly, relevant as time went by. So they started creating all these, well, actually God or that prophet or that person didn't really mean this, let me rewrite it. In Buddhism, it's the other way around. Like they try to like, oh, the Buddha didn't really mean that, or those disciples didn't really mean that. Upalabandha, from someone who had so many superpowers and was incredibly gifted, the foremost at at reading minds, etc. All of a sudden, basically, you see that in the commentaries, she becomes one who had just had a trippy experience at a meditation retreat. And that was because it was extremely inconvenient to have liberated women, or even state that women had the same ability of men. So yeah, I think we should actually do the opposite, embrace that in Buddhism. Embrace how the Dhamma is timeless. How the Buddha was a feminist before there was even the word feminist. And only an enlightened being could be a feminist 2,500 years ago in India, or anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. There was not one single feminist, whether female or male, that I'm aware of, having these types of conversations even, let alone making statements, let alone ordaining women. So yeah, what an incredible being is the Buddha. Let's embrace that and throw away all the nonsense that doesn't really make any sense. So yeah, you can research it. Venerable Analio has done lots of scholarly research on all the different versions. The Pali Canon is pretty consistent through all the versions, but well, that particular sutta, there are a million different editions with all sorts of variations of misogyny based on the particular monks who, brought it forward. So yeah, do we need that? I don't think so. We can throw it out.
Sadhu. All right, so we have a lot of very happy, inspired voices speaking here. Very much resonating. Adriana says, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. This was a wonderful Dhamma talk. Thank you for speaking on such an important topic that is rarely ever addressed. I agree, Adriana. A few other questions as well, though if I'm not addressing your question here, it is recommended that you might bring it tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. from Chad, where any and all questions can be indulged. Jessica is very happy with the answer you gave. She says, yeah, men are emotional and too moody, angry, etc. Regional beliefs and culture come into play with opinions and judgments. Great answer. I'm glad we can attain enlightenment easily as men, regardless of gender. And Dhammadharini Monastery says, thank you for talking about this important topic.
Sadhu.
Sadhu. All right. I think that's about time, though. So, again, many happy voices here. But thank you all for joining us tonight. And tomorrow morning, we will have a sutta reading at 8 o'clock. And then, like I said, monk chat at 7:30. But until then, let's end 3 rejoicing sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you all and have a great.